Hello, everyone. Making sure my mic is unmuted this time. So we're so glad to be here. My name is Joy Harold Goff. I am the Executive Director of Bump the Triangle, and our mission is to foster excellence in agency and youth using the cultural assets of African diasporic music. We offer youth enrichment programming, instrumental and vocal ensembles that build musical proficiency, cultural knowledge, heritage knowledge, and resilience. This is our fourth annual Black Music Month celebration, and we have been celebrating all month online, highlighting the contributions of Black music and musicians. Today's conversation is about the significance and evolution of gospel music. So if you haven't done so already, start a watch party and share this event so that others can join in on the conversation. So without further ado, I would like to begin introducing our special guests. Very excited about everyone who is going to be on with us today. So I will start with Miss Brandy Q. Hancock. So Brandy is a classically trained soprano from Cleveland, Ohio, with several musical performances to her credit. She has been the guest soloist for the North Carolina Symphony and Durham Symphony. She received her Bachelor's of Arts in Music, Vocal Performance, and Theater Directing from Shaw University in Raleigh, North Carolina. Brandy's passion and her love for soul-infused music can be heard dancing through several genres, from gospel music to even a touch of rock. She takes her 23 years of performance and pedagogy into her community and around the world, all the while developing performers with integrity and positive character. Brandy recently launched her ministry through multimedia company Studio Q, where she will present a series of concerts, conversations, and commentary that is rooted in the gospel of Jesus Christ. She released her first independent solo project, Proclamation the Truth, in 2019. And if you have never had the privilege of hearing this amazing voice, you need to check out that project. So welcome, Brandy.
Hi, how are you?
Doing fine. Okay, so I'm going to introduce our next guest. Let's introduce Dr. Georgery Bledsoe. So Dr. Georgery Bledsoe is an ethnomusicologist, social entrepreneur, and music education specialist. She earned her bachelor's and master's degrees from Stanford University and a PhD from Duke University, where she's currently a visiting scholar. Dr. Bledsoe is the founder and principal of Bow Bow Tree LLC, a consulting firm dedicated to equipping K-12 music educators with tools for teaching music of the African diaspora. Dr. Bledsoe is also the founder and former executive director of Bump the Triangle, where she is affectionately known as Dr. G. She continues to serve as our advisor to Bump, as well as Spark Media and the Durham Public Schools Arts Advisory Council. Welcome, 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 Dr. Georgery Bledsoe.
It is so good to be here, Joy. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yes. Okay, and so we're going to invite next into the conversation, Dr. Idella Johnson. So Dr. Johnson has devoted her life to helping the message of Christ dwell among those she encounters in ministry. After earning both a Bachelor's of Arts with honors in music and a Master's of Arts in ethnomusicology at the University of California, Berkeley, she went on to earn her PhD in ethnomusicology at the University of Pittsburgh. And during her time in Pittsburgh, Dr. Johnson was the director of the Pittsburgh Citywide Revival Mass Choir, as well as the director of the 1997 NAACP National Convention. After relocating to Raleigh in 2004, she soon accepted the call of God on her life to preach the word. And she served as the music director of Faith Baptist Preschool and the minister of music and arts at Shaw University's Thompson Boyd Chapel. So in January of 2010, Dr. Johnson became the minister of music, worship, and arts at Raleigh's Watts Chapel Missionary Baptist Church. And on May 1st, 2011, Dr. Johnson preached her initial sermon at the Watts Chapel Missionary Baptist Church and was licensed to preach the gospel of Jesus Christ. And while she looks forward to continuing her ministry to God's people through music, singing to God with gratitude and in her heart, She is humbled and blessed beyond measure to have the opportunity to proclaim the glorious gospel wherever and wherever he opens the door. So I would like to bring Dr. Johnson into the conversation.
Hello, everyone.
Hey,
Hello.
everybody. So what a pleasure it is to have everyone here today. And I wanted to start the conversation just by asking each of you to share a little bit about yourselves and your personal relationship to gospel music. Everybody comes to the music in different ways. And so I just wanted to, where are you now? What is your personal relationship to gospel music? What has the art form meant in your life? Does anybody want to start? Okay.
I'm originally from Oakland, California. My parents were from Mississippi and Louisiana. So I had Southern parents. It's like I grew up in a Southern household in California, in the Bay Area, and grew up in a pretty traditional Baptist church. There were a lot of migrants from the South who were there. And so my first introduction to gospel music was through the church. We had a lot of the Southern migrants who maintained, and we maintained in our church, the lining out tradition of, singing hymns, lining out hymns. The deacons would do that, participated in choirs there at the church. My mother gave myself and my three sisters piano lessons. So I was the one who kind of stuck with it. And I would play for the Sunday school. That's how I started out. I played the same three hymns every Sunday: Blessed Assurance, What Fellowship, and Pass Me Not. And was involved in other musical things. But that was my introduction to gospel music. And when I went to college at UC Berkeley, I became more engrossed in gospel. Prior to getting there, I started serving as music director for youth choirs and different things like that, even at my church. And when I got to UC Berkeley, our Young Inspiration Gospel Choir, I had the privilege to serve under Sylvester Henderson, and as the student director. And we recorded 2 albums. And so that was just a great experience for me. And then prior to leaving, I served as the minister of music at Cornerstone Church. The Bay Area was a very rich area in terms of gospel music. Just in terms of the tradition, I can very fondly remember being on Sunday nights. The activity was not watching TV, but it was listening to the broadcast. And so listening to Sunday night broadcasts of different churches. And then my older sisters, I would go with them sometime in church hop with them and go to the different broadcasts. And of course, we had the Hawkins there. The church where I served at Cornerstone was around the corner from Love Center. So just a very rich introduction in how I grew up with gospel music. And of course, you told the rest. And then, when I became a professor at Tufts University, I was over one of the performing ensembles. So it was the gospel choir, and it was the largest performing ensemble. And we used that particular ensemble as a way of creating community, of building bonds, of inclusion and diversity and different things like that. So that's pretty much my introduction or my relationship with gospel music. I currently serve, at Walsh Chapel, Minister of Music and Worship and Arts.
Directly tied to it. Looks like your experiences with gospel music have carried over, and not just from your personal culture growing up, but it's translated into your career, your future career. It's very, very, very closely connected to it.
I'll say this: when I first went to UC Berkeley, I was a mathematics major. And so I had plans to be a math major. And then after my first year, I said, no, I have to follow my heart. And so I became a music major.
Wow.
So that's
I have a similar story. I mean, I was an international business law major. And I was there for about a week. And I was like, what am I doing? I need to be a music major. And I didn't even go to music then. I ended up doing, I went to the communications department and was an English major, and still graduated in 4 years as a music major.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, all of your electives taken care of.
Yep. So what about you, Brandy?
Similar. I actually was a communications major. All through high school, it music was in my home, in my life. My entire family, my extended family, is a musical family. The Haynes family on my mom's side, and then on my dad's side, I had the Robinson sisters. So I was raised in music. I was raised in gospel music. I was raised in the church. However, I wanted to be a newscaster. That's what I wanted to do my whole entire life. And then I went to Shaw University, and everybody on my floor would be gone at a certain time because I was on the floor with all the music majors. So I just decided to go to choir rehearsal with them. And after that, I think I was only a mass comm major for a month or so and ended up switching my major. But my entire time of growing up, I had this really huge voice. And I didn't have this gospel voice. I had this, it was a strange type of sound. And, everybody always wanted this, 10, 11-year-old girl with a 40-year-old voice to come and sing at all of these different churches. And I didn't want to go and sing because I didn't sound like the other kids. And I was always stuck with the adult choir, either singing tenor or alto. And it wasn't until I got to Shaw University and Dr. Cornwall introduced me to classical music and opera. And that's where my voice was. But my entire time, so I moved away and moved out of gospel music, and my whole entire career was a classical career. And then I moved into jazz and R&B because you had to have ensembles at Shaw. So my other ensemble was jazz band. So I had to learn all types of jazz music, had never really had experience with it. And so I had a lot of that in my experience. And I had a classical career, still have a classical career. But as I matured as an artist and matured as a singer, I just absolutely knew what I wanted. And in the classical arena, it is a very pure sound. And I found it very hard to operate authentically as an artist with my classic sound and then my gospel influence and then all of the soul fusion. So then that's when I had to follow what the Lord said and absolutely do what he had called me to do. So if you are ever, there's an opportunity to, come and worship with me, you're liable to get all three at the same time, just because it's how he made me. And, your expression of art, you have to fully embrace that. And I just did not want to be censored anymore. So I can flip a page from Mozart to Hawkins back to Fitzgerald if I have to, and try and keep a good balance. But I've always, I've grown in the church. That was the first start, and still in the church, and that's a blessing. So I've never left gospel music. I just kind of went around and came back, and now the Lord is allowing me to define my art through his message and his word.
Well, Dr. G?
So, it's interesting listening to these stories because my story is so different and my relationship with gospel music is so different. I grew up in the Baptist church, and my piano teacher was the minister of music at the church, and she was also very involved with the National Baptist Convention. She was a gospel pioneer, accompanying people like Mahalia Jackson and Thomas Dorsey. So she taught me, I really apprenticed with her as a pianist and a little on the organ. And by the time I was in junior high school, she was sending me out throughout the region, accompanying these choirs. And some churches didn't have any choir director. And so I was in that role as well. But to be honest with you, I was never one of these fantastic gospel music pianists. And what the experience did for me is, in the place where I grew up, East St. Louis, Illinois, it really gave me an outlet, and one of 17 children. It gave me a pathway to study music in college. So I actually studied civil engineering for the first 2 years of college, and then it was like, okay, this has got to stop. I love music history, and I love studying the history and culture of music. And so that is when I switched over. By the time I was doing graduate study, my piano teacher passed away, and her family said, you know what, her house is just full of this music. Come and take a look and tell us if there's anything here worth saving. And so I called a sheet music collection of gospel music there that was huge. At the time, it was bigger than what they had at the Schomburg in New York and what they had at the Center for Black Music Research in Chicago. And so at that moment, I understood. I got a window into this St. Louis Gospel Center that I had come up through, and that my music teacher had been a huge part of, Miss Margie. And I decided to write my dissertation on gospel music. So it was a historical ethnography on the St. Louis Gospel Music Center. And so that led me, since I was still in my graduate studies, that led me to actually teach a class in gospel music at Duke University. They've got this competition for graduate students called the Named Instructorship, and I put together this proposal for a class on Black sacred music, and I got the Named Instructorship. I was the Mary Lou Williams Instructor of Music, and I had Pastor Shirley Caesar come. She spoke to the class, she did a concert, she rehearsed the gospel choir at Duke. So my relationship with gospel in a lot of ways at this point is very academic, because I'm not that great a performer, but the power of it in my own life is just undeniable. It's in my blood.
So my own personal relationship with gospel music is a lot less formal. Gospel music was just something that was in the community, and it was everywhere. I mean, the gospel music was in, I can't say necessarily my neighborhood, the way I grew up, my neighborhood was predominantly Black. My school was predominantly white. So, but we would sing everywhere, and we would sing, in the church, that, wherever the community would gather, there was gospel music, and there was the other music, but it didn't matter. I mean, even if we were in the club, there was gospel music. And so it was just something that we did. It wasn't something that I learned how to do. It was something that was just a part of the fabric of my community. And so to explain it, I guess in a weird way, it's almost like sometimes a song will play, or there will be certain harmonies that people are singing, or certain lyrics. And even if I feel like I never learned the song, somehow I know how to sit right down. I know it, and I can just join right in and be a part of it. And so I wasn't trained in gospel music, or I didn't, I can't say it's not part of my career or anything like that, but it's so much a part of my identity as a musician and as a person, that it's just hard to separate it from anything else that I do. So it's kind of like you said, Brandy, where it just kind of bleeds over into all these other genres.
It's like that for a lot of people.
I didn't have the same experience where, I had a similar experience to you in that when I began to study music, you know, everybody, you know, they had this is what gospel's supposed to sound like, or this is what classical is supposed to sound like, and this is what, and that didn't happen to me until I started to study. Before, you just sang because you sang, and whatever you sang was what you were singing. So.
Absolutely. It's the, you know, the thing that I likened it to is that, you know, you can be singing the Handel's Messiah for me, who preaches the gospel, and I get to, for he's like a refiner's fire, and someone is singing the classic line, but for me, it's a whole worship experience, and it will sound differently just because of my experience. And then that's when I knew that there was just something different about what I did. And it was okay to be that kind of classic singer, but at the same time, you know, it was going to be different. The experience and the sound was going to be different for me as an artist.
Mm-hmm. So I think it's safe to say that everybody here, it's, you know, we wouldn't have to debate whether or not gospel music required skill, or you know where I'm going with this, whether it was it's a art form that is worth the study, that is, you know, I think we all agree that we understand that. But have any of you ever come into a situation where that was challenged, like the authenticity of it, or the validity of the art form? For example, when I first began to study voice, I came from that tradition that I learned through the church. And I was never told that I couldn't sing or that I didn't have skill until I began to study. And then in that study, it's like all of the things that I knew innately that were that were pleasing, aesthetic, acceptable, suddenly were not.
Mm-hmm.
And suddenly, if I was going to be a serious musician, or if I was going to study anything, I couldn't get anything of value from what I learned in my gospel tradition. I had to put that aside and do something else. So,
Joy, it's all an approach. And when you look at gospel music, there are different set of standards and aesthetics that are not European American standards, but they are approached from the African. We're part of that diasporic tradition. And so the approach and our sensibilities and our conceptual sensibilities, that's what we bring to gospel music. And those things can be codified just like any other, like Western European. It's a different approach, and it's an art form. And so therefore it's worthy of study. So therefore, as Brandy was saying, you know, she had a very pure tone in opera, or, you know, classical music, where it's pure, very homogeneous. Well, within the Black African aesthetic, everything is very heterogeneous for us. Having a very distinct sound, having disparate timbres or different sound colors, or exploring different nuances, that's the beauty of the African music making tradition. And that is a part of gospel music. And so it's not, for us, it's not what is sung, but how is it sung?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
That how that you're talking about, Idella, this contrast between heterogeneity and this smooth, homogeneous tone. It also rises to the level of aesthetics, and that is one of the reasons we don't see gospel music in the academy, in the classroom quite as frequently as we see a lot of other musics. When I applied for the position of Mellon Postdoctoral Fellow at Brandeis, I was, you know, interviewing with the different departments on campus, the African American Studies, the American Studies Department, and the Music Department, because that position would have a triple appointment in all three of those departments. And when I got to the Music Department, I was blown away. The faculty member who interviewed me said to me point blank, "You study gospel music, and I really don't want to see us hire a gospel music scholar because I don't think it's worthy of study. I want a jazz scholar."
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it at all levels, this idea of value is not just about sound, but it's really about people. Because this sound is transporting the culture and the meanings that people have invested in their lives, and they're investing them in their music. And so at a moment like we're in now, it's important to recognize that that is why we get pushback.
And it's the same kind of drama that the spiritual received before they started putting it in a concert setting. People didn't realize, or people didn't think that it was something that was worthy of study until we put it in the concert setting. And then putting it in the concert setting, because having moved out of, because I sit in this world of academia and experience, and then my own, and then growth. Like I understood what was happening as I was growing. Then I went to school, and then it totally changed. And then I was taught music in a structured academic setting. And then I learned that as a voice major, and now they say, okay, go and be an artist. Well, how do you do that? How do you take all of those things together? And it's the same thing that kind of happened with the spiritual. You know, now people argue nowadays, when you sing the spiritual, can it be someone who's just specifically Black to sing a spiritual? Or should it be persons that are not of color? Or should we use the dialect, or should we not use the dialect? And I know that Joy can attest to that, because you'll probably have some accompanists where you'll work with them and you'll sing the dialect, and they'll stop and say, are you really going to breathe in that phrase? Like, you know, and it's like, well, that's the way it was written, so why wouldn't I? And I think when, you know, it's a genre in itself, like if I'm going to study Baroque music, I'm going to use all of the tools and the decorations that come with Baroque music. And I'm not going to sing my Baroque music like I would sing my gospel music. Unfortunately, for a lot of us who start going to school, that's what we do. We bring all of that into Mozart, and then your teacher is spending, you know, 17 weeks. 17 weeks, and say, I'm pretty sure that, you know, Shirley Caesar can sing Mozart, but I don't want to hear that exact sound. So for me, it was learning how to turn the dial. Like you had to know how to turn the dial and do it authentically, and not move away from who you are as a person. If you're going, the problem that I started experiencing is, as I was singing at other churches, the problem became is that they were trying to notate what gospel music did. And I was like, well, you can't do that. That's an experience. It's a feel. So what I would naturally be able to do, if you haven't had that experience and you don't know that, then you can't recreate that. And it's nothing that can be quantified. It's something that's lived. It's something that's breathed. So people have, I mean, I remember when I was, and I'm going to probably tell y'all a couple of things that, shouldn't, but when I tried out for American Idol, I remember the producer saying, if you are a gospel singer and you are going to come and sing gospel music, you will not get into the rounds because this is not a gospel music competition. So I understand what you're saying. It says, no, I didn't want a gospel musician. I wanted a jazz musician, because they didn't want to have to go to church. They didn't know how to, go to commercials in the middle of, certain songs. And it was crazy because it was like just half of the crowd that was there to audition, left because they didn't feel like, and I thought to myself, at that time, I'm like, man, what a bad feeling to, for someone to say that this is not acceptable, especially if this is something that is on your heart to do. And then that's just when I just started, it didn't start that early, but after that point, I just realized that I had to make a point to just be authentic to myself. Of course, as you all know, I didn't make that round, but it's just what happens because there is a misnomer about what gospel music does, where it comes from, whether it's legitimate or not. And I just think that is a very poor point of view, but the spiritual went through the very same thing. And it wasn't until you started getting it on concert stages where people were just like, oh, now we want to listen to it. Because Dr. Georgia, and I'm pretty sure that you can understand that, trying to divorce the history of what the spiritual was on what was going on in the country, it was something that people did not want to have to face. So they didn't want to embrace the music because we didn't want to embrace what was really happening in America. We didn't really want to embrace why those sounds became to be, is because it was born out of a very tragic and traumatic experience for Black folks.
Right. By the way, I did get the position that I interviewed.
Good for you.
G, when I went to Tufts, they were specifically looking for a gospel scholar.
Wow.
So that's how I got
the other side of it. They were looking for a gospel scholar.
I followed you when you left Tufts. That's when I came in. So thank you.
I was like, she paved the way for you.
Well, I would like to, we have all of these musical offerings, guys. I mean, I asked all of them to submit some musical offerings that they could talk about. And we have so many, I'm afraid we might not even be able to cover them all. But let's start with one. I just happened to see that this one is already queued. This is If I Can Help Somebody. And I believe this was one of Georgie's offerings for the conversation. So can you tell us a little bit about why this song? I asked them, so the question was to find a song out of all the millions of songs that are out there that you feel is iconic or unsung or that youth should be exposed to. At Bump, we're building playlists of songs with different categories. And so I've been taking all of these songs that people have been offering all month long and putting them in playlists so that I can share them with our youth and use them in our programming. So I'm really excited with all of the things that the community is speaking into these playlists. So Georgie, tell us why you picked, and this version too, which I was like, I know she picked that version for a reason. So tell us a little bit about this song and why you chose it.
So can I talk about the song a little bit before you play it and then talk about it some more after you play it?
Sure.
Okay. Sure. So what I want to say now about it is that I heard this song for the very first time when I was about 8 years old in my church in East St. Louis, and it was sung by the O'Neill Twins. It brought me to tears. It was probably the moment in my life when I realized how powerful music could be, and then paired with the message of the song, I realized what I could be. So that's what I'll say about it for now, and then I'll say some more after.
Okay. All right. And I just want to say too, guys, I believe we've had a couple of times where we've been muted when we played music, but I believe this time we've chosen songs that will not mute us. But if we are muted, just come on back in. They don't take us completely out. They mute us for a minute and they bring us back in. Yeah. And we are also streaming live on Bump the Triangle's YouTube channel. So if you get muted on Facebook, you can join us on Bump the Triangle's YouTube channel. All right, let's give it a go. See what happens.
If I can help somebody as I pass along, if I can cheer somebody with a word or song, if I can show somebody he is traveling wrong, then my living shall not be in vain. If I can do my duty as a Christian cause, if I can bring their beauty to a world lost, if I can spread, Lord, the message that the Master taught, then my living shall not be in vain. If I can help somebody as I pass along, then my living shall not be in vain. Then my living shall not be in vain. Then my living shall not
Yeah. This arrangement. This is a Roland Carter arrangement, and I chose it because I wanted to show how many places gospel music goes and
Oh yeah.
can go, right? It's not just in the church. And I chose this song to be shared with youth and children because, for me, gospel music has always been about the power to make your life what you want it to be, which is, a very spiritual thing, not just a religious thing, but a very impactful, powerful spiritual thing, truth. And so I want kids to breathe in this song and understand that every child has gifts, talents, if they share their talents and gifts just the way they are with the world, oh my God, not
Yeah.
only will their living not be in vain, but the world is going to benefit from who they are. And so
Absolutely.
this to me is the anthem of being who you are and living out who you are.
Absolutely. That's beautiful.
So while we, Dr. Johnson, which one would you like us to, I'm going to ask a question, but which one would you like us to queue up next?
Everything. Let everything.
Let everything. So while we're finding let everything, a question came in right here. It says, can someone speak to the traditions of gospel as it relates to the strong vein of liberation theology within the Black church, the new and old civil rights movement? That's a heavy question right there.
Right. I was about to say that's a whole other show.
It is a whole show, and it's got so many questions inside of it.
Right. Because he said new and old.
I think, you know what, the whole premise of gospel, unlike the spiritual, where we're going to get our pie in the sky and the hereafter, is that we experience liberation here, even on earth. So the songs of gospel, they're very immediate. There is an immediacy to gospel, that he walks with me and he talks with me. He's by my side right now. So that I'm experiencing this now, not when I get to heaven. So that ties in with the whole liberation theology, that what we sing about and the theology is good for me right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one. That's not to develop a whole nother show, but that's just one piece.
Yeah.
Speaks to that. That I know that I can make it. I know that I can stand, no matter what may come my way. My life is
in your hands.
Absolutely.
Right. So the words of gospel music is very liberating, so that irregardless of what I'm going through, irregardless of what knees are on my neck, that I know that I'm going to be able to make it. And it speaks to that. So the immediacy that gospel music and its messaging works for us right now. Mm-hmm. And so that's what gives us hope. It's not just for later on, it's for right now.
I also think that when people say gospel music, and we have to remember this, a lot of people are really saying Black sacred music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because they're dumping spirituals and hymns and anthems and congregational singing and praise and worship.
Right.
They're dumping all of that and calling it gospel music. And so when it comes to the civil rights movement, liberation theology, I think there's so many kinds of music. I mean, spirituals especially is Negro spirituals were, the spirit of those spirituals were extracted directly from the period of enslavement and used right within the civil rights movement. And so I don't want to be too technical and separate all these kinds of music, but I would say, and I mean, there were plenty of gospel singers who were making an impact during that period. Aretha Franklin, oh my God, yeah. So both and.
Yeah, I was gonna say that because where the spiritual stops, then you start your freedom songs. So then your freedom fight songs start. So where you left out of the spiritual, where keep your hand on the plow, but then they flipped that all around and said keep your eye on the prize, and hold on and let's continue to fight. So I think when I think about it and I look at the timeline, I look at how the time period of I think about the culture, how the culture has allowed it to move. So I think the culture allows it to speak, because if you're thinking about now, whether you have an experience, whether you are saved or whether you're not saved, or you have an experience with Christ or you don't, when you hear gospel music, there's going to be a frame of reference that you'll pick. You might not know what it is, but it's a frame of reference that you're drawn to. You may have never heard about Jesus ever in your life. You may not even know anything about what this type of music represents, but there's something that happens inside of you, whether it's something adverse or something positive. And then what it allows you to do is it allows you to contemplate on what is really happening in your life right now. Somehow gospel music has you have that opportunity, or the worship songs, like Georgie said, or all types of Black sacred music has the ability to grab you in the heart somewhere for whatever reason. So whatever your experience is. So now when you're thinking of what's going on culturally now, what's going on in our atmosphere now, like I didn't really have to know the full song that Dr. Johnson was talking about, but just because of the birth of the couplet, I already knew that, I know that I can make it. I know that I can stand. Like, I don't know, you might not know the full song, but somehow we were able to relate to it because of the motion of the couplet, which also came out of the spiritual. So I think as the time changes, the music changes for what the need of the heart is. And I think what the responsibility that we have, though, is to make sure that the theology stays rooted and that in the doctrine as well. Like, that's what the responsibility of the artist and the minister and the preacher and those who go on to continue to take the music. That's where those things have to meet. And that's why you can't just have whatever you want. It has to have a reason.
So one thing that I wanted to invite all of you to do was to speak freely about cultural continuity in gospel music. And so that's one of the things that what you just mentioned, that's what I mean by one of the things about cultural continuity. Things that were carried, that have come through the music, that we have shared in the community, and how we've been able to continue those practices and those traditions and those belief systems and heritage and culture. So as we're talking, feel freely to bring those things out, because I'm curious about where we are now. If you feel like some of those things have been fractured, or have some of those things been usurped, and if so, what do we want to remember from Afrocentric practice? What do we want? What continuities do we think are important to continue to pass on through gospel music to our children, to carry on into the future?
Rhythm. Definitely rhythm. Definitely. Please do not take that rhythm away. Don't.
Well, when you were talking about the power, the impact of gospel music on people, I was thinking about part of where that comes from. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about cultural continuities, I think about the way that gospel songs are taught to acquire. Mm-hmm. And, it's part of the oral tradition, right?
Absolutely.
Dr. Idella, you were saying earlier or maybe it was Brandy, someone was saying earlier about how you can't sing a gospel song the same way twice. That's just not going to be the way it should be done. And so you're learning gospel music 9 times out of 10 by rote. I know there are plenty of choir directors who wish their singers could read music, but the fact is, when you're teaching by rote, mm-hmm. you are helping people build their listening skills. Absolutely. And so now they're actually going to be able to harmonize, mm-hmm. and they're going to be able to improvise melodically. So you're just not performing a gospel song from, a page. It's got life in it because it is taught it is not taught as a dead music that's sitting on the page. Mm-hmm. It's taught as a live music with change. I think teaching by rote facilitates music reading. over the long term. And I've actually experienced this when I was the director of the Sacred Music Ensemble at the Charles Street AME Church in Boston, and in the gospel choir as well. And so when the two choirs sang together, even though the gospel singers didn't think they could read music,
Okay.
all you had to do was point out a few little things, bam, they got it and gone.
As long as you know up and down. As long as you know up and down. That's
More line, do it a little faster.
I started sight reading when I was like 4 or 5 years old, because just from sitting in the church and following along.
Following the
along.
line.
And then there, and then you start to see, oh, this is what their voices are doing. And I that's how I learned how to read, just by following along.
Yeah, that's how I mean, when I got to Stanford, I was ready to, lead groups because I had studied gospel music.
Mm-hmm.
It builds communalism because you have to be attuned to each other. One of the most important things about the way gospel music is learned is that idea of attunement, because now you're attuned to your director. You're not attuned to your page. You're attuned to the person in front of you. Your ears are attuned to each other. So now that director can actually mold the group with her hands and with her facial expressions and with her body language. Social emotional learning tells us that the basis of the idea of social emotional learning is that you can look at a person and kind of understand their emotions, right? So in a gospel choir, you get so attuned to your director that director can take the choir all kinds of places through that facial expression and body language. You can never get that with music off of the page.
Yeah.
And people feel that, people see that.
Mm-hmm.
No, go ahead.
To piggyback on that, in terms of what you're talking about, the oral transmission, another part of that too, in terms of, and addressing your question too, Joy, in terms of what cultural continuity, it helps us in our cultural memory. It helps us in the development of understanding tropes, of musical riffs, licks, fillings. We understand that there are some things that go in gospel and there are some things that are not. And it's a part of that oral transmission. As you were saying, it requires understanding on the part of the listener. And that, piggybacking what Dr. G had said, you have to listen. And so it helps us to develop that cultural memory of things that we just know.
Yeah.
That as a result of having encountered and experienced and executed and performed, and versus like you saying, just off the page, but it's an experience. All of that. I mean, gospel music is a kaleidoscope. I mean, it's a whole drama-packed field event. From physical body motion, all of those things, all of those nuances, cultural memory, even in terms of, like, if I were to sing,
Yeah.
People know what to do. And that's the power of the transmission in terms of the continuity. So that's
so that thing that you say, people know what to do. So when you're in a community and people know what to do, and then you're not in that community anymore and people don't know what to do.
Yeah.
But it goes to what Brandy was saying. People respond. Gospel music requires a response. There is going to be some type of visceral, emotional response. And usually, as a result, because of the power of gospel music, people realize that they're singing and they're doing things. And they're like, oh my goodness, how did this happen? When I was at Tufts, we had 136 kids in that gospel choir. They were not all of African American descent, but let me tell you, they moved as one because of the experience. And I had other students from other faiths. They loved it. They couldn't get enough of it. And those were my greatest supporters. Dr. J, what do you need done? What are you such and such? Or you couldn't beat them because of their response in terms of gospel speaking to the needs, creating community, and unifying.
Yes.
And that is very true. I think one thing though, for me, and I totally agree with Dr. Georgia, and I totally agree with Dr. Johnson. But the one thing that we have to remember that no other genre of music has is that gospel music is a story of a faith. The gospel music is about the gospel of Jesus Christ. So it's the only art form that tells the story, particularly of one person and one setting, God and the universe and his creation of what he's done with the universe, of the Bible. Someone said in one of the comments, it says that we can't forget where it came from. And no other genre of music. Country music tells a great story about country music and the country life experience. Jazz borrows from all other things, but gospel music is the story of the gospel, the good news of Jesus Christ. So this is one of the reasons that whether people want to connect with it or connect with him, whether they're in the faith or not in the faith, we have the responsibility that the thing that draws people to gospel music is, yeah, it's the experience, but it is because it's the person. Like some people just don't want to, it is the personhood of Jesus Christ. And that is the thing that is unique to gospel music. It tells the story of his life. It tells the story of God. It tells the story of the creation. So whether you are a person who feels like they have some worth or no worth at all, that is why you connect with it. Because for some reason, something has to have a beginning and an end for you. For me, it's because I love him and I am saved and I am living a life of one who is saved. It is because it's Jesus. But for someone who may not know him, I might have to take a different route to explain that to them. That's one of, so that is a part of the power of the gospel music, is that we have to make sure that I can't get up there and just sing whatever I want about Jesus. That would just be an error. There's a whole separate section of text that says that I can't do that. So it is the responsibility of making sure we present the word of God, the Bible, because the hymn is now a part in that story. We make sure that we are presenting that doctrine well. Some people do it well, some people don't, but it still has its place. And we have to, those who are teaching on the academic side, we have the responsibility of looking at that structure. And then those of us who are in the faith, who are preaching the gospel, we have the opportunity and the responsibility to say that this is what, the word of God says. And those who of us are artists, we now have the responsibility of saying, now this is how we can interpret that. That is the true definition and difference of gospel music. It is the power of Jesus Christ of which we talk about. That's why people are moved and drawn to it.
Well, before I introduce a whole other, because boy, you just opened up. You opened up some stuff.
Yeah.
Before I take it a little further, I think we should listen to some more music. So let's get Idella, Dr. Johnson's musical offering. It's been queued up for a while. Let's put on. Which one did we pick again?
Let's do Let Everything That Have Breath, and then maybe we can kind of skip those into it. Let Everything praise him. This, you want me to just go ahead and talk about
go ahead.
This one? And I guess the question specifically is in terms of youth, what song should youth be exposed to? Thomas Whitfield, known as the maestro. I always considered him the Art Tatum of gospel music. That such musical dexterity. He was a pianist, songwriter, arranger, choir director. Of course, we always look to Edwin Hawkins being the father of contemporary, but Thomas Whitfield did a great amount in terms of pushing what we know contemporary gospel now in terms of choral arrangements, in terms of phrasing. He was 38 when he passed. So
wow.
he was very young. He was in a league of his own. when you listen to people like a Kim Burrell or you listen to Donald Lawrence, all those, they are greatly influenced by what Thomas Whitfield had done in the 80s. He died in 92. And he just did such a great job with a very unique style in terms of blending gospel, classical, jazz, etc. But yet it had the pulse and heartbeat of the earthiness of gospel. And I think what he does a great job on this particular, the song we're going to listen to, Let Everything That Hath Breath, he does a great job of I think combining the fury and the fury, should I say, and the excitement of Pentecostalism, along with the more uninhibited praise of kind of a standard Baptist church choir. It's a great blend. And the other reason why I chose this song too is because what we know is celebration now in terms of what we call the bump, no pun intended, but gospel bump or shout bumps. You'll see those on recordings now. He was one of the first to put shout music in a very standardized form. Bum, 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 bum. It has become standard. And
rolling bass line.
Right, so that young people will have some type of context and point of reference. Where did all of that come from? So, Thomas Whitfield.
This is a good one.
Yeah, I'm thinking about whenever we come back from off of COVID, our choir needs to do this.
Yes.
1992.
Ooh, I don't think I'm gonna make it.
Praise the Lord. You need an answer. Praise the Lord. When you praise God, everything can change. But my God is love is the praise. Praise the Lord.
Right.
Hey, gonna praise him 'cause he heard my call. Glorious, oh, he's glorious. Wonderful, yeah. He's wonderful. Marvelous, yes, he's marvelous.
Oh, baby. Yeah. Yes.
Well, you might as well praise it. Come on. You feel the Lord tonight.
Oh, that's great.
Yep.
Yes.
I know y'all were laughing at me because my clap doesn't look like it was synced up with the music, right?
I was say, I know how the delay is, so I just stayed with the head bob. I was it's like, no, it's all about the delay in the sound, trust me.
See that comment there? Yeah, that's a good point. The comment was talking about how I pointed out once to Malcolm that a lot of the heavy metal artists, these heavy metal bands, when they get that is nothing that came straight from the church, that
Absolutely.
shout structure, you know, and they learned it from that's where they got it from. So
And then they shout.
yeah.
And then absolutely.
I want to keep the music going. So Brandy, pick one for us.
Oh wow. Why you gonna make me pick?
I can pick. I got some songs in the thing, but I want it your music. This is your music, and I want people to.
Okay, so well, what I'll do is let's do, since we're like, you know, I'm already here, Joy. Like I can't, you know, yeah, I can't come down. But I'll pick He Keeps On Doing Great Things for Me. The reason why, and actually this song was recorded by one of the Pace sisters, and she recorded it from someone else. And when I came, and I don't want to say like I moved from classical music because that would say that I'm not singing it anymore. But when I'm really started digging into gospel, one of the things that it was that song that did it for me. It was like I was still able to have certain elements of the jazz and R&B because I'm straight out the club, you know, like I'm straight from that. And it was like how, you know, there are people who are like me who was raised in a church. Then I started touring, I started working in clubs, and then where did that experience leave us? It was still very much valid and a part of it. So He Keeps On Doing Great Things. I heard Doobie Powell do an arrangement of it. So my group decided to get together and we said, okay, this is something that's real even for you. You know, like you don't have to go full-fledged, like face first back into the traditional gospel structure. But I mean, as you listen to it, you'll definitely hear it. But then there's definitely lots of the jazz and R&B influences as you see. So that was one of the reasons. And just simply because God is good. and he keeps still doing great things for me, regardless of what, decisions I make, regardless of what is going on in my life. He's still going to do, he's, keeping us from COVID and, keeping us all safe from COVID and helping us make really great decisions for our safety. So regardless of what we do, he's still doing great things in our lives.
Okay, let's hear it. Sing, Brandy. I hope you don't mind if I talk over this a little bit, but the one thing that I really loved about this, see, another experience that I had, all the musicians that played in the community, all of those musicians that I grew up with, learned what they learned in the church.
Yeah.
They all played in the church, and then they, that's where their skill came. And then they we learned as kids, and then we went to school.
Yeah.
So,
they're all up there. Yeah. Brevin Hampton, he did my recording. Like,
I'm not talking about college. I'm talking about when I was a baby. But yeah.
But I'm just saying our community, like those are my community artists. Like I didn't find people in another state. They're right here in the city.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
sing it. So good. Yeah.
Yeah, no shoes. It's a whole story about that I have to tell you. And this is JP, Jay-Sean Peel. He's an amazing saxophonist.
Brandy, yeah. So Brandy, people are asking where they can find this music.
Ooh, you can, and isn't that a shame? Hold on, wait a minute. You can find it on iTunes. You can do a digital download on all media platforms, or let me see. I do. I was about to say, I usually have them on the bookshelf, or you can find it. You can go to my website and I can mail you an actual physical copy. I'll sign it for you. It has liner notes. People don't do that anymore, but we have that. But you can go to brandyqhancock.com. That's Brandy with an I, not a Y.
All right, so I want to give a musical offering. before we get ready to close out. And I don't know if we'll play the whole thing. It's hard not to play. That's one thing you get
Play
into.
it.
Yes, it's hard not to play the whole thing. But I've queued up the Mississippi Children's Choir doing His Eyes on the Sparrow, and for many reasons. One reason I chose this is because of just my personal connection to the song in general. It's one of the very first solos that I learned how to sing. And then when I learned it, it was one of my grandmother's favorite songs. So after I learned it, I couldn't go anywhere or do anything with the family without having to sing the song.
Oh, wow.
So it got to the point to where, I mean, this was when I was really, really young. It got to the point to where I'm a young adult, and they were, and I didn't want to sing it. I didn't want to sing it anymore. Oh, they're singing Island Sparrow. And I would, I don't know, make fun of that or whatever. All right, But the year before my grandmother passed away, we had a big party for her and my grandfather, and they requested that song, and I hadn't sung it for them in a few years because I'd been away from home, and I was like, okay, sure. And I opened my mouth to sing the song for them, and my grandfather was a very quiet man, very reserved. He busted out in tears, and I had never seen him cry. So and since then, I promise you, I can't tell you if I have ever been able to sing that song again, even after that, because of the way that it impacted them and just the history of, singing it all those many years. And then the year after that, and then the year after that, losing the both of them. That was like my last emotional connection to that song. So that's one reason I chose it. The other reason I chose it is because of the Mississippi Youth Choir, that's an experience that I connect with. That was my experience. Singing in gospel youth choirs with massive amounts of children, being a part of the community in that way. And every time I see this, it reminds me of a very familiar place, very comforting, safe place. And so it brings me back to that experience. And then the other reason I chose it is because this is one of the things that I value, and I look forward to continuing that cultural continuity with Bump. And in our programming, we want to, have these youth choirs and these, youth ensembles with that kind of communal experience, having them continue that tradition and learning what that experience is like in their pursuit of music and in their musical appreciation. So this song represents a lot for me. So we can play it now. It's going to be hard to stop it, but I might stop it a little early.
Do your thing. I love it.
Why should I feel discouraged? And why should the shadows come? And why should my heart be lonely? Known for my heavenly home. When Jesus is my portion,
Look at all those babies.
I said them tiny cummerbunds.
He watches I sing because I'm happy. I sing because I'm free. God's eye is on the sparrow, and I know He watches me. Oh, I say, It's on the sparrow, and I know, and I know, and I know.
Joy, was you singing all those riffs? Was you doing no?
No. Yes, I don't remember when that, like, I don't know the year that was. I know that's a really old recording. I wonder how old he is.
Somebody said in the comments they wish they could hear him now. He is still singing. He is still an artist.
Mm-hmm.
He has a song called Turn Around. So Brian Wilson, look him up. He's still singing. He has 2 albums, I think. He has a new one out.
Brian Wilson.
Yeah, so he's still singing.
Andrew Wilson.
Yep.
Wow. Well, guys, I have kept you here longer than I promised. And
right.
It has been a pleasure. But I don't want to just drop out right now. I really want to give everybody a chance to give some final thoughts and some final words. All of you are doing amazing things. And I want people to know where to find you and how to connect with you and your resources. So if you could just take a few moments to let us, and we'll have it recorded too, so people will be able to reference it again. Tell us a little bit about what you're doing now, how we can find you and your works, and where we can worship with you. Whatever's on your mind. So final thoughts. Can we start with Dr. Johnson?
Yes, come worship with us at Watts Chapel Baptist Church. Our pastor is Reverend Dr. Harry L. White. We're located at 3703 Tryon, but our website is wattschapel.org. We live stream every Sunday at 9:30 and then also on Wednesdays at 7 o'clock. That's what we're doing throughout COVID, still worshiping the Lord. So we invite you to come worship with us.
Dr. Bledsoe, founder of Bump the Triangle, and now founder and principal of Bow Bow Tree. Can you please let us know, share with the audience a little bit about what you are doing now and how we can connect with your work?
Certainly. So Bow Bow Tree really is kind of an extension, a next step beyond Bump. What we experienced when I was leading Bump is that many teachers in the community wanted to tap into the way that Bump works with community youth. And so Bow Bow Tree is a way to spread this work to music educators throughout the country. So I've been doing professional development with schools and teachers, and I have a free resource that's available to anyone who would like it. It's available at my Facebook page. It's just my name, Georgia Bledsoe. When you go to Facebook, put that in the search box. It's called 10 Black Sacred Songs That Every American Should Know. And then I'm also working on another project now with the Hayti Heritage Center. We'll be announcing it probably in November. So I'm just giving you a sneak preview of what's going to happen. We're planning a summer institute for music educators who are interested in teaching music of the African diaspora. We're going to have scholars, music educators, tradition bearers from across the country talking about how to teach Black music to children. So you can go to my Facebook page and follow up there, or you can go to my website, which is bowbowtreelearning.com.
Thank you. And Miss Brandy, one more time.
So I have a couple of things going on. I am on the ministerial staff at Mount Zion Church in Cary, and that is where I am worshiping every Sunday. Elder Pastor Willie Harris. And we are at www.mountzioncary.org. You can find us on live stream. I am currently, I've just started a multimedia company where we have conversations about Christ identity through conversation, commentary, and concerts. And they're called through Significant Ministries, live from Studio Q. So in the next month or so, I will be presenting a classic concert of music from John Carter to Hall Johnson, Mozart, talking about my experience through Christ and my identity and how it is connected to my art forms. You can find me on any type of social media through Brandy Q Hancock, or you can go on brandyqhancock.com. So I'm on Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, the whole nine. If you search Brandy Q Hancock, I'm the only one there. So that's what you'll find.
All right, ladies, it has been a pleasure. And I like to do this. You guys don't see him, but all this tech, this is not all me, believe me. We have a wonderful volunteer, Matt. Yeah, he's behind the scenes. He keeps it running for us. He makes it easy, and so I really appreciate you, Matt. Thank you so much for helping us out. Until the next one, we're celebrating Black Music Month all month long. We've been celebrating. We got a few more days. It's not over yet. Please be looking for the posts. We have an art auction that's live. Beautiful artwork. All of these live streams have been recorded. You can find them all on Bump's YouTube channel, Bump the Triangle. And we'll be reposting things periodically for the next few days to wrap it up. So I just want to say, if you want to keep in touch with what's going on, please go to our website and subscribe to our mailing list, so that you can keep up and know what's going on with programming and what's going on behind the scenes. And you can also donate right there on the website at bumpthetriangle.org. So it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much, ladies.
Thank you, Joy. It was great seeing you. Like Dr. G said, it was like a little family reunion. I hadn't seen her in a while. I hadn't talked with you in a while. It was wonderful meeting you, Dr. Johnson.
Yes. And I look forward to talking to you guys again in other spaces and places.
Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.